I'm a software architect. I live by logic. So, when my perfect husband told me a system error canceled my ticket for our luxury investment trip to Dubai, I tried to believe him. But when I found the truth, logic turned into cold rage. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was planning to steal everything. He just picked the wrong person to betray. The air at the San Francisco Tech Gala was thick with recycled venture capital and the sound of people monetizing buzzwords. I hate these events. As a security architect for Cygnus Solutions, I see the flaws in systems. These parties, all bright lights and false urgency, are just human-sized security flaws. My husband, Marcus, lives for this. He was holding court by the champagne fountain, a perfect picture of the ambitious founder of Ethereum Ventures. Ethereum was built on my code, on my late-night architecture sessions, and funded almost entirely by my Cygnus salary and stock options. A detail he always seemed to forget when the spotlight hit. He spotted me, and his practiced smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He cut through a circle of angel investors, his hand landing on my elbow. "Ilara, babe, come outside. We need to talk." His grip was too tight. The sudden chill of the terrace air hit me as we stepped out, the lights of the Bay Bridge glittering below. "What is it?" I asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the fog rolling in. "Babe, I just got off the phone. There's some bad news about the Dubai trip." My stomach clenched. The investors. Did they pull out? That trip next week was everything. It was the final round, the big injection of capital Ethereum needed. No, the deal is solid," he said, too quickly. It's a system error. A ridiculous logistics foul-up. I waited. I'm good at waiting. My job is to let systems talk until they reveal themselves. "The investors," he huffed, running a hand through his hair. "They're just old-fashioned. They only want to meet with the face of the company. That's what they said." A cold dread, sharp and familiar, started to creep up my spine. "Marcus, what are you saying?" He finally turned to me, his eyes wide with practiced sincerity. "There was a problem with the booking. Your ticket. It's been canceled. The system glitched, and by the time they caught it, the flight was oversold. I'm going to have to go alone." I stared at him. A system error on a first-class, fully paid corporate booking. I know, he said, grabbing my hands. I was on the phone for an hour, yelling at them. "But listen, Ilara, it's fine. You're the brains. You always have been. You built the whole thing. But this part, this is just shaking hands and signing papers. This is the salesman's job. It's my turn to shine." He pulled me into a hug, but it felt wrong. He was stiff, and his heart was hammering against my cheek. "You just trust me. I'll go. I'll close this, and we will celebrate so hard when I get back. This is for us, Ilara. All of this." I let him hold me, but I was analyzing the avoidance in his eyes. He was lying. I just didn't know why. We went home early. The silence in the car was loud. Back in our condo, he didn't try to kiss me. He didn't pour us a drink. He went straight to his study. "Just need to prep the final presentation," he called out. He was unusually protective of his new work laptop he'd bought last month. He claimed his old one was too slow for the demos. I'd offered to optimize it, but he'd waved me off. Now, he was angled away from the door, the screen hidden. I'm a 36-year-old lead architect. I'm not an idiot. But I was his wife. I was in the kitchen, staring at the kettle, when my phone pinged. It was an email to our shared Collins Travel inbox, the one we use for itineraries and utilities. The subject line: flight cancellation confirmation, EK226. My hands were steady as I opened it. It was a flawless, automated message from the airline. "We regret to inform you that your booking for passenger Ilara Collins has been successfully canceled at your request." It looked perfect. It was polite, efficient, and final. And it was a complete fabrication. I sat down at my own console, my real workstation. I didn't bother looking at the text. I opened the raw email. This is what I do for a living. I don't read the friendly greeting. I read the source. I checked the metadata. It took me less than 30 seconds. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze. The email hadn't come from the airline's servers. It wasn't relayed through any international carrier's domain. The originating IP, the SMTP header, it was all time-stamped and signed. It was generated from mail, Ethereum Ventures, com, from his own company server. He hadn't received a cancellation. He had authored one. He'd faked a corporate email, sent it to our shared inbox, and assumed the woman who literally writes secure packet transfer protocols for a living, would be too stupid or too trusting to look. The suspicion I'd felt on that terrace wasn't just a hunch. It was a threat alert, and the alarm bells were screaming. I walked into the study. Marcus was so focused on his screen, headphones on, that he jumped when I put my hand on his shoulder. Jesus, Alara, you scared me. I gave him a tired smile. Sorry, I was just thinking. This Dubai presentation is too important for any last-minute tech issues. I'm still the admin on the main server. Let me log in and run a diagnostic. Make sure the demo environment is stable for you. Relief washed over his face. Oh, babe, would you... That's brilliant. You're the best. He probably thought I was just being a good, supportive wife, helping him pack his parachute. He didn't realize I was checking for holes. He went to bed an hour later, blissfully unaware. I stayed at my console, the glow of the monitors painting my face. I didn't need a password. When I built the Ethereum network, I created a root-level admin account for myself. You never build a system without giving yourself a backdoor. I wasn't interested in his demo files. I went straight for the server logs. First, the phone records. He'd told me he was on the phone all day with the investors, the airline, the hotel. I pulled the logs for the last 72 hours. Nothing. No calls to Dubai, no calls to any investors in the Middle East. No long, frustrated calls with any airline. His entire day's communication had been internal. My hands were moving fast now, my pulse steady and cold. This wasn't panic. This was analysis. I left the phone logs and went for the travel authorizations. The real ones, not the faked email. I pulled up the corporate travel account. There it was. Booking reference HND 45B. 2 passengers. Booked 4 weeks ago. My stomach hollowed out. There was no booking for Alara Collins. There never had been. There was 1 ticket for Marcus Collins, and a second ticket, booked at the exact same time, on the exact same itinerary, for a passenger named S. Rollins. Same flight, same transfers, same booking for the 2-bedroom executive suite at the 5-star hotel. S. Rollins. The name was a blank, a variable I hadn't declared. I tabbed back to my admin console. I didn't have access to his HR files, but I had root access to the entire server. I didn't need to go through the front door. I pulled the company directory. It was a small startup, only 12 employees, not including Marcus. I typed grep, Rollins, etc. password. A result came back. Srollins. User Sloan Rollins. Title Director of Strategic Development. Hire date 6 months ago. Sloan. The image hit me instantly. Of course, the girl from the holiday party. The one I'd barely noticed, the one Marcus had introduced as my amazing new intern. 28 years old, blonde, all teeth and ambition, hanging on his every word. The one who was just so eager to learn the business. Intern. Director of Strategic Development. The titles weren't just different, they were a lie. One was for me, and one was for the rest of the world. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I didn't just have server access, I had access to the shared Microsoft Exchange server. I pulled up Sloan's calendar. It was sparse, mostly blocked out for project work. Except for next week. The entire week, from Monday to Friday, was blocked off in a bold, obnoxious purple. One event, repeated daily. Title Dubai Conference M.C.S.R. Marcus Collins, Sloan Rollins. It wasn't a system error. It wasn't a logistics foul-up. It was a plane ticket. It was a hotel suite. It was a 6-month-long lie culminating in a week-long trip to Dubai with his intern. So, I sat back, the rage so cold and sharp it almost felt like peace. He wasn't just lying to me. He was using my money, the money I gave him from my job, to fund his affair. But the numbers didn't add up. Why fake the cancellation? Why not just say, "I'm only taking my top director"? Why the elaborate, stupid lie about the airline? The lie was too much for an affair. It felt bigger, more complex. My job is to find the vulnerability in a system. I had just found the entry point. Now I had to find out what he was really protecting. The affair was the entry point, but the lie about the ticket was the firewall. It was too complex, too easily disproven. It wasn't designed to hold up to scrutiny. It was designed to stop me from scrutinizing in the first place. I don't stop at firewalls. I dismantle them. I left my console and went to his study. His new laptop was sleeping, plugged in on his desk. He'd been so careless, bragging about its seamless integration with his new cloud backup service. A second-tier provider I'd warned him against, one whose flashy interface masked critical security flaws. I knew it had a vulnerability. In fact, I knew it had a specific zero-day exploit in its session handling protocol, one I had discovered during a routine audit for a client at Cygnus Solutions. The patch hadn't been pushed to the public yet. I sat at my own terminal. Not his. I didn't need to touch his hardware. It took me less than 5 minutes. I didn't guess his password. I didn't bother with brute force. I crafted a packet, spoofed an admin token, and bypassed his entire authentication framework. I mounted his private encrypted cloud drive as if it were a local disk on my own machine. I had access to everything. The first folder I found was the one I expected. Projects. It was a nauseating mix of videos and screenshots. Sloan in our bed. Sloan in his office after hours. Sloan in hotel rooms on business trips I had funded. The sheer volume of it was pathetic. I felt a dull, predictable ache. But the rage was cold, not hot. The physical betrayal was a distraction. It wasn't the real story. This was just human messiness. I closed the media player and kept digging. I was looking for the real vulnerability. I found a second folder, buried 3 levels deep, named Ventures Phase 2. It was full of scanned documents, legal documents. My breath caught. It wasn't Ethereum paperwork. It was a series of drafts for the incorporation of a new shell company, registered in the Cayman Islands. The officers listed were Marcus Collins and Sloan Rollins. I clicked on the next file, Dubai Agenda. It wasn't a list of investor meetings. It was a precise minute-by-minute schedule. Day 1, meeting with Alistair and Bain, a law firm specializing in offshore asset transfers. Day 1, afternoon appointment at a private bank to open and fund the new corporate account for the Cayman entity. There wasn't a single investor mentioned, not one. They weren't going to Dubai to meet investors. They were going to Dubai to meet lawyers. My mind was racing, connecting the nodes. How could he? The company's assets, my code, were locked down. He couldn't sell or move anything without my signature. I owned 40% of the company. My intellectual property was the company. And then I saw the scan. My stomach dropped. It was a power of attorney. A general POA I had signed 7 years ago, when we first incorporated Ethereum. It was a standard founder's document, a safeguard in case one of us was incapacitated or unreachable during a medical emergency. It was meant to protect the company. He was planning to use it to gut it. The plan was all there, in a memo to his new Cayman lawyer. Once in Dubai, he would use that POA, citing my unavailability, to execute an emergency liquidation of Ethereum's primary intellectual property. He was going to sell my entire codebase, my life's work, to his new shell corporation. The price, a token amount, $100,000. Once the IP was transferred, he would drain Ethereum's operating accounts, which I had just agreed to fund, into the new Cayman account. He and Sloan wouldn't be coming back. They were scheduled to fly from Dubai to the Caymans, leaving me in San Francisco with a hollowed-out bankrupt company and millions in outstanding loans that I had personally guaranteed. This wasn't an affair. This was an execution. I couldn't feel my hands. I was just scrolling, numb, when I saw the last file. It was a draft, saved in his email folder. A message to Sloan, sent just last night, right after he'd spun his lie about the system error. The ticket drama worked like a charm. She's annoyed, but she bought it. She's too trusting. Once we have the money and we're clear of U.S. jurisdiction, Alara will just be a bad memory. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. I read the line one more time. Then I closed the connection. I didn't wipe his drive. I didn't delete the files. I simply unmounted the volume. I cut the connection. Clean. There were no tears. My grief was a physical thing, a heavy, cold mass that settled in my chest. But it wasn't sadness. It was the precise, clarifying anger of a system under attack. When you find a critical vulnerability, you don't cry, you patch it. When you find an active intrusion, you don't mourn. You contain the threat, trace its origin, and you set a trap. Marcus was no longer my husband. He was a hostile actor. I picked up my phone. It was almost 2 a.m. I had one call to make. "Jenna," I said, when she picked up on the second ring. "This better be good." "Alara." "I'm in the middle of an audit from hell." "It's better," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I need you. The little pub on Mason. Now. Bring your kit." There was a pause. "How bad?" "Marcus." "I'm on my way." "Jenna, my best friend since MIT, is a forensic accountant. She's 37. Where I find flaws in code, she finds them in ledgers. She sees the stories people try to hide in their spreadsheets and offshore accounts. She's the only person on Earth whose analytical paranoia matches my own." The bar was dark, smelling of stale beer and bleach. The bartender was half asleep. We took a booth in the back, the vinyl cracked and cold. I didn't order a drink. I put my laptop on the sticky table and spun it around to face her. "He's not just cheating on me," I said, my voice low. "He's trying to commit multi-million-dollar intellectual property fraud and flee the country. With his intern." Jenna didn't offer sympathy. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She just put on her glasses, cracked her knuckles, and said, "Show me." For 10 solid minutes, the only sound was the click of her trackpad. I watched her scan the fabricated email, the Cayman incorporation papers, the offshore bank agreement, the scanned power of attorney, the Dubai agenda. Finally, she leaned back, took off her glasses, and rubbed her eyes. She looked at me, and for the first time, she smiled. It was not a nice smile. "He's an idiot," she said, her voice dripping with professional contempt. "He's a complete and utter amateur. He's trying to pull a fast one on a lead security architect and a forensic accountant. What a moron!" The validation was a relief, but I was already past that. "He thinks I'm too trusting." "You were," she said, not unkindly. "You were a wife. Now, you're not." "So, what's the plan? We call the bank, we call the airline, we get this POA revoked, we can shut this down in an hour." I shook my head. "No, shutting it down isn't enough. He liquidates the company. I'm still the one holding the bag. I personally guaranteed the loans. Jenna. He'll file for bankruptcy from a beach, and I'll be ruined." I took a breath. He can't just be stopped. He has to be neutralized, completely. "Good," Jenna said. "That's the Alara I know. So, we're not just patching this. We're launching a counter-exploit." "Exactly. First, I secured the evidence. I created 3 encrypted, time-stamped backups of his entire cloud drive. One went into a secure vault at Cygnus. One went onto a physical drive I gave to Jenna, and the third I routed to a server in Switzerland I maintain for emergencies. If he deleted anything, I had the original. "He thinks I'm going to be a bad memory," I said, the words tasting like acid. "He thinks I'm just going to roll over." He's counting on me being the supportive, heartbroken wife. Jenna nodded, catching on. So, that's what you're going to be? The plan began to form, rapidly, the pieces clicking into place like a complex algorithm. He needs my money to make this work, I said. He's counting on one last wire transfer from our joint account to fund the operation before he drains it. So you're going to give it to him, Jenna finished. I'm going to let him think his plan is working perfectly, I said. I'm going to let him get on that plane. I'm going to let him feel the win. And while he's in the air, you and I are going to dismantle his entire life. I got home just before sunrise. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving behind a sterile, cold calm. Marcus was asleep in our bed, snoring softly, the picture of innocence. I looked at him, the man I had loved, the man who was actively planning my ruin, and I felt nothing. The love wasn't just gone. It had been surgically removed. I waited until I heard the shower start. Then I walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and put my head in my hands. I made sure I looked exhausted and tear-streaked when he came out, a towel slung low around his waist. "Ilara," he asked, the feigned concern in his voice making me want to vomit. I looked up at him, summoning every bit of supportive wife I had left. "Marcus, I'm so sorry." He looked confused. "Sorry for what?" "For how I reacted last night. About the ticket." I let my voice crack just a little. "I was just so disappointed. I really wanted to be there with you. But you were right. This is your moment. I'm the brains, but you're the face." I stood up and put my hands on his chest, a gesture I knew he read as submission. "I'm being selfish. Go to Dubai. Go and win. Land this deal for us. I believe in you. I am so proud of you." The relief that flooded his face was intoxicating. It was pure, unadulterated smugness. He thought he'd won. He pulled me into a tight hug, his lips brushing my hair. "Oh, babe, thank you. I knew you'd understand." "I promise. I'll make this up to you. This is for us." "I know," I whispered into his shoulder, my eyes wide open and staring at the wall. "I know." He spent the next 2 days in a state of self-congratulatory bliss. He was on the phone constantly, not to investors, but to airlines, confirming his upgrades, and to restaurants in Dubai, making reservations. He was an open book, and I was reading every page. While he was busy planning his victory lap, I was busy executing my counteroffensive. My first call, from a secure burner phone, was to Mr. Davies. Davies is the top white-collar crime attorney in San Francisco, a shark who smells blood from a mile away. I'd met him at a Cygnus retreat. "Mr. Davies," I said. "My name is Ilara Collins. I'm a lead architect at Cygnus. I'm calling because I've uncovered an active conspiracy to commit wire fraud and intellectual property theft, orchestrated by my husband. I have the complete, time-stamped evidence." There was a pause. "How complete?" "I have incorporation papers for the Cayman shell. I have the plan to use a fraudulent power of attorney. And I have the full travel itinerary. He leaves in 48 hours. "My 10 o'clock just canceled," Davies said. "Be here at 9:30. Bring your evidence. And don't use your personal email again." The next phase was technical. While Marcus was out picking up travel essentials, which, according to our credit card alerts, was a new suit for him and a very expensive handbag from a store Sloan favored, I logged into the Ethereum server as root. I didn't just back up my code, I migrated it. The entire core intellectual property, the algorithms I'd spent 5 years developing, the predictive analytics engine that made the company worth anything, I moved all of it. Every last byte. I transferred it to a new, air-gapped, encrypted server I'd spun up in a private cloud, a server that existed only to me, firewalled from the rest of the world. It took 3 hours of silent, frantic work. Then, I replaced it. On the Ethereum server, where my code used to be, I left a honeypot version. It looked like my code. It had the same file structure, the same function names. It would even pass a basic diagnostic. but I'd seeded it with critical, subtle flaws. The moment anyone tried to run a real load test or a deep inspection, the kind any real investor would do during due diligence, it would fail. It would not just crash, it would corrupt the entire database it was connected to. It was a digital time bomb. He was planning to sell a hollowed-out shell, and I was going to make sure that's exactly what he got. Finally, I set alerts. I'm a security expert. I put triggers on everything: our joint brokerage account, our savings, my personal accounts, the Ethereum operating accounts. The second any amount over $1,000 was moved or any new external login was attempted, my phone would light up. I was a spider, and I had just finished spinning my web across our entire financial life. Now, all I had to do was wait for him to walk into it. My deep dive into his cloud drive hadn't just uncovered the affair and the Cayman scheme, it had uncovered his sheer, sloppy greed. Marcus wasn't just running one con, he was running several. Buried in a subfolder I'd almost missed, I found another set of pitch decks. He was simultaneously shopping my technology to a mid-level venture capital fund in Austin, a group called Lone Star Capital. He was pitching them the real code, the concepts I had built, promising them exclusivity and a regional partnership. The server logs showed he'd already taken a seed investment from them, nearly $500,000, wired to an Ethereum account I didn't even know existed. He was using my intellectual property to defraud other investors while planning to defraud me. I sent the encrypted package, the Lone Star term sheet, the hidden bank account statements, the pitch deck to Mr. Davies. His reply came an hour later, requesting a secure call. "This is the nail in his coffin," Davies said, his voice stripped of all pleasantries. "What he is doing to you is grounds for a catastrophic divorce. What he is doing to Lone Star Capital is a federal crime." "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "It means we have allies," Davies replied. "I've already reached out to their general counsel. To say they are furious would be a gross understatement. They believed they were the sole seed investors in a revolutionary technology. My evidence proved they were just one mark in a much larger fraud." He took a sharp breath. "And they are not small players. They have significant ties in Texas, including, as it happens, a strong relationship with the FBI's regional cybercrime and wire fraud division. They want to cooperate. Fully." Suddenly, this was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a criminal sting operation. The final piece of the trap clicked into place that evening. Marcus was packing, radiating an obnoxious, giddy energy. He came into the kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck in that fake stressed way he had. "Babe, one last favor," he said. "Anything," I replied, my voice smooth and supportive. "These Dubai investors. They're old school. They want to see significant liquid capital in the main operating account before we sign, just to prove we're stable." I waited. "How significant?" $2 million, he said, wincing, as if the number pained him. "It's just for show. We have it sitting in the joint brokerage account. I was going to move it over, just for 24 hours, just so they can see the balance when I land. Then I'll move it right back. It's just simpler if you authorize it from your terminal." I almost laughed. He needed me to personally arm the bomb he was building to blow up my life. He was asking me to transfer the very money he and Sloan were planning to steal. I looked at him, my face a mask of wifely duty. "Of course, if it's for the deal, whatever you need. Marcus, that's what that money is for. Our future." I called Davies immediately after. "He's making the move. He wants the $2 million. "This is it," Davies said, his voice electric. "This is the honeypot. Here is the protocol. Exactly. You will authorize that transfer. The second you hit send, you call me. That transfer from your joint account to his corporate account is the actus reus. It's the final overt act of the wire fraud. He is actively commingling stolen funds in preparation to flee the jurisdiction. And then," I asked, "the moment you confirm, I notify Lone Star's counsel. They, in turn, notify their FBI contact, who will be waiting. With the evidence from you and the corroborating complaint from Lone Star, they will have more than probable cause. They will immediately execute a federal warrant to freeze every single asset tied to Ethereum Ventures and Marcus Collins, and they will issue a warrant for his arrest. The plan was perfect. Marcus and Sloan would be boarding their flight, checking the Ethereum account, and seeing that $2 million had landed. They would be celebrating. They would think they were rich. But that deposit was the tripwire. The money wasn't their escape hatch. It was the bait. All I had to do was hold my nerve. I had one day. I had to smile, help him pack his bags, and drive my husband to the airport, all while knowing I was handing him over to the federal government. The night before his flight, I put on the expensive black dress he loved, the one he said made me look like a CEO's wife. I made a reservation at the best restaurant in the city, the kind with a 3-month waiting list and microscopic portions that cost a fortune. "What's all this?" Marcus asked, looking genuinely surprised as he knotted his tie. "A celebration," I said, smiling warmly. "To celebrate your big trip. You're about to close the biggest deal of your life. You deserve it." He beamed. The pure, uncut arrogance rolling off him was almost suffocating. He thought this was all for him. He had no idea it was. The restaurant was high above the city, a wall of glass overlooking the fog swallowing the Golden Gate. It was obnoxiously romantic. We ordered champagne, the expensive kind. "To Ethereum," Marcus said, raising his glass, his eyes glittering, "and to the future." "To the future," I echoed, my glass clinking against his. The sound was sharp, like a tiny crack in the ice. He was expansive, high on his own perceived brilliance. He spent an hour painting a vivid picture of our new life. The condo in Dubai, the private jet, the way we'd finally be able to show all those people who doubted him. "After this trip, Ilara," he said, leaning in, his voice low and conspiratorial, "you will never have to worry about money again. Not ever. I'm going to give you everything." "I know you will, Marcus," I said, my voice soft. This was it, the final move. I sipped my champagne and pretended to have a sudden thought. "Oh, speaking of which, I meant to tell you." He paused, a bite of caviar halfway to his mouth. "What's that?" "The transfer. The money you needed for the investors. I took care of it." His eyes snapped to mine. "You did?" "Mm-hmm," I said, swirling my glass. "I transferred the $2 million from the brokerage account into the main company account this morning. I figured you'd want to go to Dubai with a full hand, just to make sure you have plenty of liquid capital to show them, make them feel secure." I watched him. It was fascinating. The tension in his shoulders didn't just release, it evaporated. His face, which had been tight with a barely concealed anxiety all week, suddenly lit up with a blinding, ecstatic combination of pure, unadulterated greed and profound relief. He was a drowning man who had just been thrown a life raft, and he was too stupid to see it was an anchor. "Babe," he breathed, reaching across the table to grab my hand. His palm was sweaty. You're the best. You're just the best. That's amazing. Thank you." I smiled. It was a smile I had practiced in the mirror. It was bright and cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "Only the best for you, Marcus." I let him bask in it for another 30 minutes. Let him order another $100 glass of wine. When the check came, I let him pay, using the credit card I was about to have canceled. As we were walking out, I put a hand to my throat. "Oh, no, my scarf, the blue silk one." "I'll go get it," he offered, already self-important. No, I said. "You wait for the car. I know exactly where I left it. I'll be right back." I didn't go back to the table. I walked to the end of the hall, near the restrooms, and pulled out my burner phone. I had one number on speed dial. Jenna. She picked up on the first ring. "Well, the money is transferred," I said, my voice a whisper. He's seen it. He's ecstatic. I heard the clack of a keyboard on her end. I see it. $2 million, sitting in the primary account. Davies is on standby. Lone Star is on standby. The FBI is on standby. The fish isn't just on the hook. Ilara, he's in the goddamn bucket. Good, I said, and hung up. I walked back to the front of the restaurant, empty-handed. No scarf, Marcus asked, holding the car door open. Guess I must have left it at home after all, I said, sliding into the seat. Silly me. The 45-minute drive to San Francisco International was the longest, quietest drive of my life. The air inside the car was a toxic, pressurized thing. Marcus, in the passenger seat, was practically vibrating. His leg bounced. He was humming. He kept checking his phone, not to see if the flight was on time, but to refresh his banking app, to look at the $2 million. My $2 million. He was a child who had successfully raided the cookie jar and was now just waiting for his parents to leave the house so he could eat himself sick. You're awfully quiet, babe, he said, patting my knee. His hand felt like a spider. Just nervous for you. I lied, my voice a perfect imitation of a supportive wife. This is so huge. This is everything, he said, his voice reverent. He squeezed my leg. This is where it all pays off. I know. I pulled up to the curb at the international terminal. The Emirates sign glowed above us. Well, I said, putting the car in park. This is you. He was already unbuckling, grabbing his carry-on. Oh, fantastic, he said, his face bright with relief. Sloane's already here. She saved us a spot in the line. I followed his gaze, and there she was. Sloane Rollins, standing by the first-class check-in counter, next to a mountain of brand-new, matching designer luggage. She was wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my first car, looking for all the world like a woman about to be whisked away on a life-changing adventure. She saw Marcus and her face lit up, a bright, knowing, victorious smile. She gave a little wave. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. Waving. Marcus turned back to me, his face rearranging itself into a mask of loving, dutiful husband. Okay, babe. Wish me luck. He leaned in to kiss me. It was a quick, dry press of lips. It felt like nothing. It tasted like betrayal. I'll call you when I land, he said, pulling back, his eyes already flicking back toward Sloane. I caught his chin, my fingers firm, forcing him to look at me one last time. I needed him to see my face. I'll be waiting, I said. I let my voice fill with all the emotion he expected, but for all the wrong reasons. Make this trip memorable, Marcus, please. Make it all worth it. Oh, it will be, he said, his smile all ego, completely missing the iron in my voice. You won't even recognize our lives in a week. I'm counting on it, I said. He got out of the car. He didn't look back. I watched him walk the 30 feet to where Sloane was waiting. He didn't kiss her, not there, but he put his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of casual, confident ownership that made my stomach clench. They laughed, heads bent together, and pushed their mountain of luggage toward the security checkpoint. They looked glamorous. They looked happy. They looked untouchable. I sat there, double-parked, ignoring the angry honk from the car behind me. I didn't move. I watched until they presented their passports. I watched until they looped through the queue. I watched until they were both swallowed by the TSA security line, disappearing from my view. They were in. They were past the last public checkpoint. They were on federal ground. I put the car in gear. I didn't go home. I drove slowly, circling the airport, and went up to the 4th level of the short-term parking garage. I found a spot in a dark corner, facing the wall, and cut the engine. The silence of the concrete garage was absolute. My hands were perfectly steady. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the burner phone. I dialed the only number in its memory. Jenna answered before the first ring finished. Status. "They're in," I said, my voice flat, echoing slightly in the empty car. Both of them cleared TSA at the international terminal. They are in the sterile area. They're at the gate. I heard the sharp, satisfying click of her mouse. "Activating," she said, "sending the final time-stamped packet to Davies and Lone Star's counsel now." I knew what was in that packet. My affidavit, the complete transaction logs, the wire transfer for the $2 million I had sent yesterday, the Cayman Incorporation papers, the fraudulent power of attorney. "Counsel confirms receipt," Jenna said, her voice the calm, detached voice of a surgeon. "They are forwarding the complete package to the FBI task force. The federal magistrate is signing the warrants." Right. Now. I pictured it. Davies on a call with the furious Austin VCs. The VCs on the line with their FBI contacts. "It's done. Ilara," Jenna said. "The warrants are active. All Ethereum accounts are frozen. Effective immediately. His personal accounts are next. The asset freeze order is being executed. And the arrest. The arrest warrants are live. The team is on site." I clicked the phone off and sat in the silence. He was in there, probably buying a celebratory espresso, believing he was untouchable, hurtling toward his new life. But I had just locked the door behind him and set the building on fire. I didn't stay in the parking garage. I had my own trip to take. I'd booked my own ticket 2 days ago, on a different airline, to a different continent. I had my own carry-on in the trunk. I walked through the same security checkpoint they had, an anonymous woman in a sharp business suit, just another architect heading to a meeting. My flight was in 90 minutes. I found my gate, BA 286, and sat down. From my seat, I had a clear view of the International Departure Board. Their flight, EK 226 to Dubai, was listed 2 lines above mine, on time. I looked at my watch. It was 10:15 a.m. The asset freeze had been active for exactly 10 minutes. I knew exactly where they were. They were in the Emirates first-class lounge, a quiet sanctuary of brushed steel and free champagne, just 1 level above me. I didn't have to see them to know what was happening. I had engineered this moment down to the second. Right now, they were settling into plush leather chairs. A server was pouring them Veuve Clicquot. I pictured Sloane, her feet up, giddy with success, raising her glass. "We did it, Marcus," I could hear her saying. "We really did it. Goodbye to that cramped old life." And Marcus, leaning back, the picture of smug satisfaction, finally victorious. He'd be checking his phone, looking at that $2 million balance for the 100th time. He'd raise his own glass. Goodbye, naive Ilara. And then, now, I pictured his phone, the brand new one, buzzing on the glass table. Not a text, a call. He'd look at it, annoyed by the interruption. A San Francisco number he didn't recognize. He'd answer, all arrogance. Marcus Collins. And a polite, cold voice on the other end. "Mr. Collins, this is the Fraud Prevention Department at your bank. We're calling to inform you that a federal warrant has been executed. All accounts associated with your name and Ethereum ventures have been frozen, effective immediately." At the exact same instant, Sloane's phone would ping. She'd be trying to buy some overpriced duty-free perfume online, something to celebrate. But the transaction wouldn't go through. Credit card declined. She'd try again. Declined. "Marcus," she'd say, her voice losing its edge. "My card isn't working." "What?" He'd be staring at his own phone, his face draining of color. "This is impossible," he'd be saying into the receiver. "There's been a mistake." "There is no mistake, sir. A federal marshal has signed the order. Your assets are locked." The panic would be immediate, primal. This wasn't part of their plan. I pictured them, the champagne forgotten. Sloane's face, a mask of confusion and terror. Marcus, his arrogance shattering, replaced by a frantic, rat-like energy. "It's a glitch," he'd hiss, snapping his laptop open right there in the lounge. "It's a server error." He'd try to log into the Ethereum admin panel. He'd try to access the bank accounts directly. He'd try to initiate the Cayman transfer, but he wouldn't be able to. His login would flash red. Access denied. He'd try again. Access denied. He'd try his admin credentials. User not recognized. I had revoked his access. I had demoted his user profile to guest and then deleted it entirely. He was locked out of his own company. He was locked out of my system. What's happening? Sloane would be grabbing his arm, her voice rising. Marcus, what is going on? He'd slam the laptop shut. He'd be white as a sheet, his mind finally catching up. This wasn't a glitch. This was an attack. This was me. And right at that perfect, terrible moment, the velvet-toned PA system would cut through his panic. Flight EK226 to Dubai is now boarding at gate A9. All passengers in first and business class are invited to board at this time. The plane. Their escape. They would look at each other, sheer terror in their eyes. They'd think the freeze was just a bank-level problem. They'd think if they could just get on that plane, just get out of U.S. airspace, they'd be safe. They could land in Dubai, go to the lawyers, and sort it out from there. I pictured them grabbing their carry-ons, Sloane stumbling in her expensive new heels. They wouldn't walk. They would run. They would bolt from the lounge, knocking past other passengers, desperate, like cornered animals, running for the one escape hatch they thought they had left. They were running right into the final phase of the trap. I was at my gate, A12 sitting by the window. I had a clear line of sight to their gate, A9. It was about 50 yards across the concourse. I saw them long before they reached the podium. They weren't walking. They were running. Marcus was in the lead, pulling his expensive new carry-on, his face slick with a terrified sweat. Sloane was just behind him, stumbling in her heels, her face blotchy and red, mascara already streaked down her cheeks. They looked frantic, panicked, and cheap. They shoved past a family and rushed the first-class counter. Marcus slammed his passport down. "We need to board. Collins and Rollins. We're late." The gate agent, a woman with immaculate patience, didn't look flustered. She took his passport. She took Sloane's. She scanned them, her fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on her keyboard. Marcus was vibrating with a horrible anxiety, looking back over his shoulder, then at the jet bridge, then back at the agent. "Is there a problem?" he snapped. The agent looked up, her expression perfectly neutral. "Mr. Collins, Ms. Rollins, could you please step to the side for just a moment?" "No." Marcus's voice cracked, drawing stares. "Our flight is boarding. We have to get on that plane." "Sir, it will only be a moment." And then they were there. Two men, emerging seamlessly from the crowd of travelers. They wore nondescript blazers. They looked like mid-level managers, completely forgettable and utterly terrifying. They flanked them, one on each side, cutting off the path to the jet bridge. "Mr. Marcus Collins," the first one said. His voice was quiet, almost polite, but it cut through the noise of the terminal. Marcus stopped breathing. "We have a few questions for you regarding Ethereum Ventures," the agent continued. "We need you to come with us, please." Sloane made a small, suffocated noise. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a balloon deflating. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with terror. "Marcus, what is this? Tell them." "Marcus." But Marcus was paralyzed. His face was a waxy, bloodless white. He was staring at the agents, his mind completely broken, unable to compute this new reality. His eyes darted wildly around the concourse, searching for an escape, an explanation, anything. And then he saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. Across the 50 yards of empty space. He found me. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't crying at home. I was sitting at gate A12 in the front row. I was wearing my best navy blue power suit. My passport and my own boarding pass were held lightly in my left hand. I was ready for my flight. I held his gaze. I let him see me. I let him watch as all the pieces clicked into place in his ruined mind. The system error, the $2 million, the supportive wife, the entire elaborate trap. He finally understood. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't bad luck. It was me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just looked directly into the eyes of the man who had tried to destroy me, and I gave him one single, cold, decisive nod. Confirmation. Execution complete. I saw his mouth form my name. A silent, horrified, Ilara. At that exact moment, the second agent took his arm. Sir, you need to come with us. Now. As they gently but firmly turned him away from the gate, Sloane dissolving into hysterical sobs, a new, bright announcement chimed over the PA system. Final boarding call for British Airways Flight BA 286, with service to London, Heathrow. All passengers should now be on board. That was my flight. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my suit jacket. I didn't look back at the mess they were making. I turned my back on Marcus, on his tears, and on the federal agents who were cuffing his hands behind his back. I walked to my podium, handed the agent my ticket, and stepped onto the jet bridge. I was on my way to London to chair the European expansion meeting for Cygnus Solutions. I had just given myself one hell of a promotion. Thank you for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. And please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.